Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. We have lots to discuss today. We're going to take a look at the Atlantic Division as is, with the moves made, subtractions and additions. How did they do? Are they better? Are they worse? We have some other news, but we'll start with our pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So I got excited the other day because I heard the New Jersey Nets were going to get some throwback uniforms. And I was thinking, oh, that's great. They're going to go back to like the old ABA early NBA look with Dr. J and Super John Williamson and those guys. No, they're going with powder blue with clouds around them, and it looks ridiculous. It looks like a shirt that Robin Williams would have worn in Mork and Mindy. Like, I don't even understand it as a uniform. It doesn't even make sense. When they said throwback, it's not throwback NBA. It's like throwback to like Woodstock.
Okay. First of all, I'm sorry. I have visions of that jersey of Drazen Petrovic coming around the screen and hitting jump shots from the three-point range. So that is a throwback jersey. May not be one you liked. I actually didn't mind the powder blue because for that era, it kind of fit. I am partial to the Super John Williamson and the Dr. J. I actually have a pair of shorts that have the red and white striping with the stars on it, which was the old Nets logo, but more so when they probably played at the Island Garden and also when they were the New Jersey Nets at some point in time as well. But again, look, I don't know if I want to harken back to the Derek Coleman, Kenny Anderson era. But in terms of, I picture Petrovic in those jerseys, so I'm fine with it because I was a huge Petro fan. The other guys, not so much, but it's kind of an interesting throwback because every team, look at what Dallas wore last year. There's been some weird, funky throwback jerseys and third jerseys that have been worn in the NBA the last couple of years.
So why is the picture that popped up with Kyrie Irving instead of Kevin Durant? Are they afraid Kevin Durant's never going to play a minute for the Nets?
Because Kyrie Irving would consider it a slap if he didn't get recognized first, because he is such.
No, but I mean, the elephant in the room is Kevin. You're right, but the elephant in the room is Kevin Durant. Like, this guy's not played a minute for this franchise yet, not a minute.
Well, it's not like Kyrie Irving had a lot of playing time either last year.
The only thing I've seen Kevin Durant is in these stupid commercials on the Yes Network with him holding the basketball with one hand. It's like, what was zippity do that? Let's see your Achilles work before we're promoting you.
I'm a Durant fan. The guy's a great player. I'd much rather have Durant on my team than Kyrie Irving.
He's a phenomenal player, but it's like I've never seen somebody more promoted during a season where everybody knows he wasn't going to play a game.
That was a weird thing for any sport. I mean, look, I saw Durant. I was invited by 2K Sports back in the day when they used to have a college basketball game, and they sponsored.
There was a tournament they played. Didn't they have a
tournament at the Garden? Yeah. He was playing with Texas Tech or Texas. Yeah, and I went there and I watched it, and I was like, hey, this guy's fantastic. So, like, I have an appreciation for the player, but he was overly promoted for the fact that he wasn't going to step on the court.
All I know it's scary is that Oklahoma City had Durant, Westbrook, and Harden, and couldn't figure a way to get it to work and couldn't figure a way to get them to try to stay somewhat together.
Right. Well, that's the NBA in a nutshell, really.
I need to ask you this because, you two are well-known Jets fans. And I get the feeling
one of us is 100% Jet fan. The other one is not.
Which one's the 100%?
Yeah. You know which one is not.
Wait, hold on. I started my rooting interest in the Niners in 1979 when Montana went there. It's not like I was.
And you're not 100%. That's all I said.
Ross, trust me, if they had made it to the Super Bowl the 2 times in the championship game, I had tickets already in my hands to go to both games.
I get it, but that still doesn't make you 100%.
I've suffered just as much as you.
Because you mentioned the Niners. That makes you less than 100%. That's all.
But I've suffered just as much as you have.
Yes, you suffered. That's fair.
The Bills made it 4 years in a row, and there was not even a hint of me going to one of those 4 Super Bowls. So, all right, but I have to ask this. I have to ask this question because we mentioned Le'Veon Bell getting cut by the Jets in typical Jets fashion, where they're trying to trade him, and then they decide it's better to just cut him, and now the rumor is that it's either Buffalo, Miami, or Kansas City, and it's going to come out today. A, do you care where he goes? And B, if he goes someplace, do you think he'll actually be good, or do you think he'll just be crap?
I mean, here's what I could tell you about him. He still has quick feet. He can't break a run, but he certainly had no blocking. Now, I wouldn't use him for more than 10 runs a game. Would I target him 15 times in a game as a receiver, absolutely is like a third option all the time, as maybe a first option once or twice, definitely, because he could definitely catch the ball. That's what he's good at now. That's the new Le'Veon Bell. He is no longer a breakaway running back.
So in terms of, he came to camp out of shape last year because he had missed the year, and I think he was a bit too heavy. This year he was in great shape. They've had no blocking. The scheme has been horrible, and he was utilized poorly. Other than that, it's gone perfectly well for him.
Right.
But in terms of usage, look, Kansas City could use him, although they do have Edwards-Helaire. They don't really have a guy behind him. Buffalo, you have Devin Singletary, but you have Moss, who they haven't really factored in because he's been hurt. And Miami, to me, that would seem to be the more logical location because of the fact that they have a more glaring need, in my opinion. In terms of usage, I think we've always talked about him being split out wide, being effective in the pass patterns, about a guy who also is pretty good about picking up blitz packages as well.
Yeah, no, he can pick up blitz.
He definitely has usage. He would be a benefit anywhere. I think in terms of the team that probably could use him the most, it is probably Miami based upon a need.
Actually, I think Arizona, if they were on the board, clearly he doesn't want to go there because they don't have a running back.
The ironic part is the Jets play all three of those teams the next 2 weeks. So that's the ironic part of the equation.
I actually think that, yes, Miami has a need, and he may get more of an opportunity in Miami in terms of, snaps. But I think Buffalo has he has a chance to win in Buffalo and be used in Buffalo, especially like last week, TJ Yeldon, who was playing former Jacksonville Jaguar, who was playing an increased role because the rookie running back that they have was injured. He was in on a passing play and let a blitzing linebacker beat him, completely burn him, and Josh Allen got sacked. If Le'Veon Bell is an upgrade in terms of a blocker and in terms of a pass catcher, then I think they're probably going to cut Yeldon and if they sign Bell. So
he'll be better than what LaShawn McCoy was last year.
Right. And see, that's the reason I think he won't go to Kansas City, because LaShawn McCoy was barely used and then basically scratched during the playoffs. Not to say Bell would be scratched, but I think that, that treatment of a formerly great running back. Anyway, all right, let's start.
Formerly great running back, currently bad tipper.
Well, always bad tipper. And I'm not talking about Tipper Gore. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, October 15th, 2020.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, well, we're going to talk about teams in the Atlantic Division in a few minutes. So a couple of the big stories that happened in the last 24 hours will be folded into those. But we'll start with this because Vegas owner Bill Foley made a little bit of news yesterday. Now, nothing is confirmed from the NHL, and we know that the NHL is keeping their options open because we really don't know what's going to happen in terms of fans in the stands, in terms of how many games. Everything is up in the air, but Foley did an interview on a Vegas radio station and let it slip that he doesn't think the season is going to start until early to mid-February, that the season could be anywhere from 55 to 60 games, and that there would be a 1-year realignment of the league, 31 teams, and that would mean a 7-team all-Canadian division. And I'm assuming that would be the case because, and I'm writing an article on Hockey Buzz about this today, Justin Trudeau came out and said that he is not going to open the Canadian border until, quote, the U.S. has their COVID under control, which is the ultimate in hypocrisy because it's blowing up in Canada as well. But okay, we'll let that go. But Jan, you first. I don't think that the idea, it may be the reality that has to happen because of the border situation, but I think the Canadian teams should be pissed off at an all-Canadian division because it's going to limit it to 4 Canadian teams when the playoffs come. If they do intra-division playoffs like they normally do, they probably won't be wild cards, and it'll be the 4 teams in each division, and that means you limit the 7 Canadian teams to 4 playoff teams.
From the rationale perspective, to a certain extent, given the issues with the border, right, and you can talk about hypocrisy. Unfortunately, this is not changing probably anytime soon, although, who knows what's going to be with the election, right? That may have a driving factor in terms of a lot of things, which is kind of the specter that oversees everything. But, Larry Brooks wrote about this in his Slapshot column over the weekend. in terms of positioning of a Canadian conference. I mean, the way around it to a certain extent, if you think about it, is, well, first of all, you're not really aligning East Coast and West Coast, right? You're getting rid of kind of the conferences
Right.
are pretty much obviated to a certain extent, especially if you're having one Canadian conference. You can say the top 24 teams or X number of teams make the playoffs.
Right.
You know, each division winner makes it, and then the next X number of teams in terms of record kind of makes it, and that makes it mildly fairer. I mean, conceptually, it's interesting because if you're not going to be able to travel, or the borders are going to be closed, you're going to have restricted travel. This is a way around it where you can still maintain a semblance of a normalcy of a season. Granted, not the ideal. I mean, are you only playing teams within your conference? Is kind of going to have to be, depending on how many games you have, right? And then you have to figure out logistically in terms of what number divides into what number equally, depending on how many teams you have in each conference as well, to try to make it fair for everybody.
And that's and that's going to be different for each conference because the Canadian one will be 7,
right?
The other ones will be 8. So what all of a sudden that the Canadian conference will be playing less games because it's divisible by 7?
Like, we can do 56.
Right.
If every other one has 8, you can do 56 because each team plays each other 7. 7 plays each other 8, or 8. Depend. You're gonna have to kind of figure this out. It's not ideal. It's not perfect. And again, if it's only 7 teams, then you can't go at 56 because it's not divisible. If you play every team 8 games, it's only 48. So logistically, it's going to be very difficult to kind of figure out, and something's going to have to get factored into the mix. But part of it's going to depend on starting date, right? Its starting date is going to be a big issue, right? And how many games you're going to play, and all that is still needs to be figured out. I mean, the date. Look, the NBA has now said we're looking at probably January 18th to start is where we're looking at a start date.
Russ, before you talk about what you want to talk about here, I just want to respond to Terry in the chat here. Okay. It's 210,000 people who have died in the U.S. The population of the U.S. is 10 times the size of Canada, and and Trudeau did not talk about the number of deaths. He talked about the number of cases. The number of cases in Canada are blowing up. I get an update every day that's saying how many new cases in certain areas in Ontario. It's blowing up. It doesn't matter. Nobody has, everybody. I mean, maybe everybody in the U.S. is not wearing masks. If a certain person wins the election, that might be mandatory. But the reason for this is saying that keeping Americans out because they don't have things under control. They don't have things under control in Canada. But anyway, go ahead, Russ.
Fair enough. So, Nate Schmidt, the only reason we know about this Canadian thing that was talked about is because of Nate Schmidt, because Foley got defensive about having to talk about dumping him. And he's like, well, I'm not really dumping him in division because they're going to have that stupid Canadian. I don't know if he said stupid, but he may have said something derogatory.
Right.
Canadian division. He certainly was acting like he didn't love the idea, but it was good for him because since people thought he was trading in division, he was basically saying he didn't. And
at least for a year.
And it's possible
that's all he cares about. Next year, no one's going to bother him about it.
It's possible it's not good news for him, Russ, because I'll tell you right now, the number of Canadians that go to Vegas when the Senators,
that's a big deal. That's
a big deal. I bet you the hotels, I'll bet you the restaurants, I bet you all that they, especially if those games are in January and February. You don't think like people were going down for a weekend in Vegas to watch the Leaf game or something like that? Of course they are.
Well, for all we know by then, right? Even though the NHL may go with this approach, we may have a less restrictive travel over the border, and but you're just not going to having Ottawa coming, but you still may have because if they don't start filling up the arenas at a certain point in time, the revenue impact is going to be felt for another year, which then we get into the whole conversation all over again with escrow and revenue sharing and everything else.
Actually, so here's his actual quotes. It wasn't a derogatory thing. He just said, but they're going to be playing in the Canadian division. And then the host is like, come again. And he's like, I think they're going to play a Canadian division. So he thinks he's not even 100%.
Right. But he let the cat out of the bag, basically.
Yeah, and then he said, I don't think they're
Brooks
going
did
to
it already on Sunday. He wrote about this.
But
it's only reiterated. Coming from an owner is a lot different than coming from a columnist. I agree.
Exactly. Yeah. But this is the thing that people have to be concerned about. I mean, one thing, the Canadian division, you're talking about Toronto playing 8 games against Vancouver. So that means, I don't know if that means one trip to Vancouver where they play like a 4-game series, like a baseball model, which they might do. They talk about restricting travel. But what's the advantage of the division where it's the Islanders, the Rangers, the Devils, Philadelphia, Boston? I mean, there'll be bus trips from Manhattan to Long Island or to Newark. Whereas teams like the Leafs are going to be flying cross country 2 or 3 or 4 times to face Edmonton, Calgary. I mean, it's
okay. But here's an issue that I may have with Foley. So he's like, if we're not playing in front of fans, I don't know a lot of teams that can make it, including us. It's going to be very difficult. Okay, sure. You guys packed them in for years now, and you might have to go a year and a half without fans. You could deal with that. But then he also said, I believe Gary Bettman's not going to be having us flying around if playing in empty arenas. There's going to be another plan, and we'll see. And it's like, Bill, you can't predict that, and neither can Gary. So the fact is, if they're going to start to cry poverty, like that franchise has had everything handed to them. And I think a lot of franchises would be like, yeah, we would love to be suffering like the Vegas Golden Knights are right now.
Yeah. All right. One other story, and then we touched about it briefly yesterday, but there, seems to have been a little advancing of the story regarding Joe Thornton. Now he signed a contract with HC Davos. It's basically a contract until he gets an NHL contract. So it's,
actually, Mike, one more thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Before you get deep into it. So Forbes has Vegas ranked 13th, worth $580 million.
Okay.
I'm going to guess and just think they're going to be okay.
Yeah. Thornton signed a contract with HC Davos. He's going to play, I think it's probably like right now because they're, 7 or 8 hours ahead of us.
Right.
And there was a tweet from a German reporter covering the Swiss League that said that, and it was a quote from Thornton saying that he would be making a decision on an NHL contract, quote, soon. Now, I don't know if that means today or if it means in a week, but it sounds like it's imminent. And based on the reporting from not just one person, but, it was Chris Johnston, it was Elliot Friedman, it was James Myrtle, the Athletic, it was Pierre LeBrun, that the Leafs and Thornton are discussing a potential contract. And now a few of them also said that it's also possible he goes back to San Jose. But this is the thing, Jan, that I'm a little suspicious of about him going back to San Jose. He was visibly and audibly pissed off at the end of the year at the deadline when San Jose did not trade him to a contender. And apparently there were teams that were interested in him at the deadline, and they did not move him. So, I mean, I'm not saying that rules out him going back to San Jose because his home and his family have been based in San Jose for over a decade. But I think that gives a distinct possibility that he does sign in Toronto.
I think there's a possibility. I mean, look, it all depends on how strong the pull of going back where he's played the substantive part of his career after getting drafted by Boston and getting traded there. Right. How much does that outweigh and potentially trying something new and playing in Toronto? As frustrated as he was last year, suiting up for the team for one more year may outweigh it. Although, look, in Toronto, he'll probably see more ice time just because in San Jose, just because the nature of the squad and what's needed there, as opposed to the usage that he'll have in Toronto. But as we talked about a couple of times, right, the opportunity potentially to win, which, look, he's made the Cup Finals once, and if they got beat by Pittsburgh, that may be the driving factor for him to determine to play in Toronto as opposed to San Jose. It's that balancing. Do I want to take the shot at the Cup, or do I want to be in a situation where it's a comfort zone that I've spent so long in my career, and I'm kind of somewhat still the face of that franchise?
No, he'll probably go for a shot at the Cup, but I'm just not rosy on this signing because you could say, hey, it's low risk and all that stuff, but Joe Thornton does bring a certain amount to the locker room too, and you don't know ever how that mix is going to be. And that's something that you can't predict until it starts happening. And also, we can't predict. Like, here's something Kyle Dubas is going to keep an eye on. What if he gets hurt in Davos? He's not getting signed by anybody then.
Well, yeah, they haven't signed him to a contract.
No, that's my point, right? Everybody's like predicting he's going to be there or whatever. He's 40-something years old. He may get hurt in this season.
Right, but if they end up basically now it's like, Joe, you're crap out of luck. I mean, it's like we haven't signed you. It's like if prove it in this situation with Dobbs. Okay, let's see if he's in shape. Let's see if he hasn't lost anything. And once he's proved that for 4 or 5 games, then we sign him.
I think Funky's basically saying Joe should go to Del Boca Vista in so many words. It's hard to figure it out here, but I don't know if he's there yet. But the idea is if he just gets one knee sprain, ankle sprain, something, even if it's doctors say, hey, it's not that big a deal, teams are going to then get scared because of his age. There's
this is here is where I think the thought process is wrong. If the Big Smoke says if Thornton signs Kerfoot as a prime candidate to be traded, no, he's not, because Thornton will be signing for probably close to the veteran minimum, probably $1 million a year. They don't need to move cap space, and they don't need, Kerfoot is the third line center. Now, they think that they like Kerfoot better as a winger. He played in the top 6 on the wing last year with Tavares. If they think that that's a good fit, then maybe Thornton moves to third line center, but they're not going to weaken them. They're not going to have Thornton as a third line center and Spets as their fourth line center. That's very slow up the middle after Tavares and Matthews. They're not going to do that.
Timothy, I don't have any background noise here currently. Maybe you're hearing something. I mean, there was a big truck that went by. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
I don't think they're just going to dump Kerfoot. They're not. And
he's not a $4 million player, Mark. He's making 3.5.
Yeah. They can't afford to. He's a penalty killer. Yes. They need some depth with their greasy players. They can't afford to. It's not like Joe Thornton's going to come in and all of a sudden start using the body. He's not that guy.
That's the thing. People really, they in Toronto, they didn't like the Kadri deal. There's a negative perception about, obviously, because not Brody, because who signed with Edmonton? Tyson Barrie. Tyson Barrie. Sorry. Tyson Barrie was a failure, and he was. But Kerfoot got his face broken by Jeff Carter in November. It took him most of the year to really get back to where he was, and then he played pretty decently in the playoffs. So he's a good player. You don't simply dump him just because we don't like him.
There's the name, Jeff Carter. Are we going to see him this year?
There's the background noise.
Yeah, okay, that was a motorcycle. But are we actually going to see Jeff Carter this year? I don't know about that.
I doubt it. All right, let's start with the look at the teams in the Atlantic Division. Start with the bottom, the Detroit Red Wings. Jimmy Howard is gone. They add Thomas Greiss on a 2-year deal. They trade for Mark Stahl. They sign Troy Stetcher on the blue line. At forward, they add, let's see here, Nemestikov, Bobby Ryan. They bring back Sam Gagner on a 1-year deal. Are they better? Sure. Well, they were the worst team in the league last year, so adding anybody would make them better. But Russ, they're nowhere close to being a playoff team, and that's not going to be the case for probably a couple years.
Yeah, they're still last place. Like, they just might not be as boring a last place team as they were last year, but they're still last place. You got to give fans something to watch when the fans do eventually return, because they are going to have a decent amount of fans because it's a hockey town. So Yzerman's going to feed them something, and I got to give it to him. At least that's more than Jets fans get to watch each week in the NFL. So as an example, but you have to give people something to watch. Otherwise, in your quest to be better and still gain high draft picks, you don't want to lose your whole fan base, and they won't do that.
Now, Jan, what I think Yzerman's doing here, especially with the signings, not Nemestikov and not Stetcher because they're 2-year deals, but Bobby Ryan and Stahl, who they traded for, I think these are, let them play, let them show people that they can still play, and at the deadline, we're going to flip them for draft picks, which is smart.
Absolutely. They've signed a couple of guys that they're going to expose. If you look at that team, it's kind of almost difficult to figure out who they will protect. Clearly, Bertuzzi and Mantha, both were restricted free agents, will be signed probably to longer-term deals. So, Bertuzzi, Larkin, and Mantha will be protected, probably Fabry as well. Once you get beyond that, it's kind of hard to see. But all the guys who they signed to 1-year contracts this year, those are the guys who will be moved, and especially the veterans. Mark Stahl will be moved at the deadline. If they could find a taker for Filppula, maybe Darren Helm could get moved by the deadline. I mean, Bobby Ryan is a candidate also to get moved by the deadline. I mean, they added a material upgrade in net by getting Grice compared to what they had the last years with Howard and Bernier. So are they a contender? No, but they're clearly ascending because of the fact that Yzerman knows how to build a team. He has a raft of draft picks to begin with, and he's probably just going to augment with a ton more. And they're also going to have cap space, which allows them to be somewhat aggressive in the marketplace next year, which is a perfect combination. And he's shown with Tampa, he's willing to play the long game to make the team a long-term contender. I don't see them doing any short-term or stupid fixes here. They're going to play the game out, and he's going to basically add guys piece by piece so they can build a contender for down the road.
And I know that they sent Veleno to the SHL for the year because basically once they send him there, he can't come back. And I think, Russ, did they send Sider to the SM League or they send him to the SHL? I think it was the SHL.
I thought the SHL.
Yeah, so I mean, that's two of their bigger prospects, and they sent them to Europe.
But they still might be able to come back on the back end. Look,
after the season is over with.
Yeah, with Sider, it's fine, right? Because when that season ends, he'll definitely play some in the NHL. With Veleno, it'll really depend on how he does. I mean, Veleno's still not a guarantee for the NHL, although I think he's going to make it, and I like his upside. Right. He still has to prove himself. Like, there's still some doubt out there, and I don't think it's within Yzerman, but I just think it's in general, and I think this is a good way for him to prove himself, have a good season there against pros, and then maybe, he'll get some NHL time.
Okay, moving to the Ottawa Senators, Craig Anderson, I don't know if he's going to retire, but he's of age, still out there. They bring in Matt Murray on the trade for a second pick and Jonathan Gruden, a great deal, and sign him to a 4-year contract. They trade for Eric Branson, which I think was basically a move to get to the floor. They have, let's see here. They traded for Austin Watson. They signed Nick Paul to a 2-year extension, and just literally a few minutes before the webcast, they have signed Evgeny Davidov to a 3-year deal at $5 million per. Okay, are they better? Yes. Are they a playoff contender? No, not yet. This is the thing, Russ. I look at them and I was impressed with what they did with not a lot of experience and a lot of young guys, and they have young guys coming. I like the Bathersons, and I like and I really like Brady Tkachuk as a future cornerstone type of player. Norris, they got in the deal for Carlson. There's some good young players there, but
Stützle, obviously.
Stützle, but he'll probably stay in Europe this year.
Yeah, after the injury, yeah.
But there's there are pieces there, but I think they're well away from really being a playoff contender.
Yeah, they have some nice pieces. They still don't have the right mix. They still don't have good enough defense. They might have good enough goaltending now, so that's an upgrade. But they're still going to be second to last, third to last in that division, probably second to last. But they'll be improved and better to watch, and it'll still be a better product. And I think you would get more fans at the rink when they're allowed. I think that's something that we could foresee. But it kind of feels like with Dadonov that I would pretty much guess he doesn't have any stipulations on that contract. I'll be surprised because he would look good in the Seattle Kraken uniform after that. And I think I don't think he'll play his 3 years there. But it'll be him or Murray, right? They'll probably have a choice of both unless Murray has something in his deal that he can't be exposed. So,
Matt Murray, no. I mean, he's going to be the goalie they protect.
So they'll protect him. So Dadonov might be the guy they dangle out there if they extend other players, or if they feel like they're going to make revenue that year or whatever. Maybe that changes. But otherwise, I could see Dadonov being dangled.
I don't think so, Russ. I think, obviously, look, Russ, Mike and I were talking before the show. I mean, I think Ottawa definitely needs a number one center unless they move Tkachuk, but I personally think he's better on the left wing. I mean, you got to figure Tkachuk's protected, Dadonov's protected, Colin White's going to be protected. I think the guy Artemi Anisimov is going to be exposed because he's a UFA. I think after.
Yeah, so he doesn't qualify for being exposed,
right?
Because he's a UFA.
Right, so he can't be exposed. So I think there's other guys look.
They don't have a lot to protect.
They don't, right?
They may not actually have enough players to actually protect. If they go 7-3-1 defensively right now, they protect Shabbat. They probably protect Nikita Zaitsev, and they probably protect like Josh Brown. Up front, I mean, they, if
Chuck White,
Kachuk White, Dadanoff,
Connor Brown,
Austin.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you might be right about
Brown,
that.
Connor Brown. I mean, and
just because they don't have enough players.
I think also if he would be in his third year, but I'm about to take a look. But that's about it. I mean, the guy who probably, Austin Watson would be the guy they expose.
Yeah, Chris Tierney might be but I'm saying when you're protecting.
No, that's fair. They may not have enough. I didn't think about that. That's a good point.
And they have to have enough players to expose. Remember, I think it was like two forwards and one defenseman that played, I think, like over 70 games over the cumulatively over the last 2 years. Honestly, Russ, who I can see them signing because of DJ Smith being a former Leaf assistant. I could see them sign Freddie Gauthier.
Yeah, you know what?
Because Freddie Gauthier would meet the.
He might be that guy then. Yeah,
I could see them signing him, but I'll just say I like the direction that they're going. I like the youth that they have. Next year in the draft, they have a first and 3 second-round picks. So I mean, they're loaded with prospects. They're going in the right direction.
So is Edmonton, and they have to do other things to get that, to be able to become a better team. And even Edmonton isn't there yet.
You need to see Brandstrom really become a major portion of that defense.
Yeah, I don't know if he's got that. I think he's
I agree with you. I mean, still you have Ridley Gregg is not necessarily ready yet, but he's going to be a guy who's going to be a perfect third-line center on that team.
Someday,
yeah. Shifting to the Buffalo Sabres, their goaltending is the same as of right now with Carter Hutton and a restricted Linus Ullmark for next year. Defensively, they re-signed Brandon Montour. They've added at the back end of the blue line Brandon Davidson and Matt Irwin, which I think Matt Irwin is basically just a designated fighter. Brandon Davidson played for.
Come on, he plays defense, Mike.
Yeah, really badly.
Actually, to be fair, Matt Irwin did see playoff time with Nashville back in the day. He's a decent fill-in guy. He's not bad defensively. He's just not fast.
But he's being brought in for physicality.
Definitely.
And physicality and character. Obviously, the big news is the signing of Taylor Hall to the 1-year deal, the trade of Marcus Johansson for Eric Stahl. They re-sign Zemgus Girgensons. They bring in Cody Eakin, Tobias Reeder. Right now, Olofsson and Reinhardt and Linus Ullmark are all arbitration eligible restricted free agents. Again, are they better? Yes. Are they a playoff team? Well, with that goaltending, not a chance in hell.
I mean, I won't say not a chance in hell. I'll say it falls on Ullmark now, probably, if they're going to be. Carter Hutton with his corrective vision, I don't know. Yeah. They certainly are going to score goals. We know that. How many are they going to prevent? That's going to be their season now.
Yeah. Well, their top 6 is going to score. The bottom 6, I still.
That's true.
Jury's thought. We talked about Girgensons, and we thought, Joe Jordan said $2.2 million is a pricey pay for what he gives you. Though he is kind of a legacy guy, which probably contributed. I guess the question is, when is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen going to be ready to maybe be the goalie of the future that they hope he could be? And if that's the case, that's probably when you're looking at when he's going to be on, right? So, look, I think we talked also. Tage Thompson at $1.4 million a year for each of the next 3 years is a bit pricey because I haven't seen much out of him.
They love his size. They love his size, Jan. But the problem is he had reconstructive shoulder surgery, so it's he's a big body.
He is a big body, no question, right? And on the line with Girgensons and Eakin, that could be an interesting line. I don't think I don't know how much they're gonna score, but it's an interesting line. I mean, and also, what are you doing with Casey Middlestadt? Is he going to get a shot at moving up, or because if not, I know everybody talks about Elias Anderson being wasted the 7th pick. Well, Middlestad's the guy a lot of people the Rangers want to take, and right now he's kind of looking like a waste of a pick at the 8th spot. Though, if you look at that draft overall, especially the upper portion, once you get past the top part of it, that whole middle raft from like 6 or 7 on is not looking particularly favorable in terms of the guys that were taken there. It's early. But
but he had 25 points in 36 games. It's not like he's talking about he had like 10 points. Give him another AHL season if he needs it. He's only 21. Like at this point, the fact that he was rushed, let's not rush him again.
Right. Yeah, I do know from being around the Sabres and covering them last year that Middlestadt, when he did get sent down, there was a little bit of an adjustment period. I'll just leave it at that. But then he did play better later on, and maybe you give him a half season in the AHL. But the thing is, Russ, we don't know if the AHL is going to have a season, so he could be on a taxi squad in the NHL.
He could be, and it could be like Major League Baseball, and that is a fair point. And then you have no choice. Like then he probably will see some time. But I mean, he had 9 goals. Let's not totally write him off yet. But again, as far as this season, I'm not going to count on him for anything. I'm going to say, like Jan said, first 2 lines are good. The other 2, not so great. Gergensons is a great guy to have on a team, but just because ownership likes him because he's a good guy isn't a good enough reason to pay him. I'm with Jan on that. And then, beyond their top 3 defensemen, we need to see more. Now, maybe Will Borgen will finally gel and get it, after they finally give him a chance. And maybe some of those things will help mixing some of their skill on defense with physicality. And then, maybe they'll win some games then. But, yeah, they're still going to have to stop the puck.
Well, I mean, a couple things here. Again, the Dylan Cousins question is still up there. We talked about that with Joe, whether – he gets a chance to play. I mean, with all these players that they've brought in, like Lazar, or they kept Lazar after last year, but like Reeder, whether Reeder plugs in as a 4th line guy, or he's on a taxi squad, or he's in the AHL. And, if they bring in Cousins, they're not going to play him on the 3rd or 4th line. They're going to try to play him in a primary role because he's a talented kid. And I'm waiting.
Then who are you moving out then, Mike?
Right, exactly. Well, I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
The problem is your 3rd line, you don't have that 3rd line is not what I would call an offensive line. It's more of a checking kind of a line, which means you could put him there. You just don't have a guy. You don't have anybody opposite him or centering him. Right. That's going to basically play to his talents.
Well, Jan, that was I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, because right now they're at around where people said that their budget was going to be, which was around $70 million, and that's after signing Hall, which means I get a feeling that maybe they trade Sam Reinhart. Maybe Hall was brought in and they signed. Hall was brought in as a smokescreen, and then Hall's here, hallelujah! And by the way,
it's to ignite the fan base. They had a chance to get a star player, so they did it.
And by the way, we traded Sam Reinhart. That kind of thing.
I mean, that could happen. Like that, I'm not going to be shocked if all of a sudden, what if the Rangers and Buffalo make an RFA trade and they trade D'Angelo for Reinhart?
Yeah.
It's not impossible. I could see an RFA trade going down some way, somehow with Sam Reinhart.
Yeah, but the problem is he doesn't fit the Rangers' need because they need a center, and Reinhart isn't a center, in my opinion.
Right.
But they still need more than just a center, too. It's not like they're loaded.
Now, okay.
You're going to tell me their bottom
six?
I'm not saying
they're loaded. We'll discuss that when we get to the Metro.
Yeah, there we go. I like that.
You gotta leave them wanting more.
No, that's true.
Shifting to one of the busier teams in the NHL, the Montreal Canadiens. Here's the list so far. They traded for the rights and signed Joel Edmondson, 4 years, $14 million. They extended Jeff Petrie. They traded Max Domi for Josh Anderson and signed him at $5.5 million for 7 years. They extended Victor Mete for a year, Xavier Ouellet for 2 years. They signed Tyler Toffoli to a 4-year, $17 million contract. After trading for Jake Allen, they extended him for 2 years, $5.75 million. And then yesterday, they extended Brendan Gallagher after there was a hue and cry that the talks had been broken off, that Gallagher was pissed off that they had signed Toffoli and signed Anderson. Lo and behold, he gets a 6-year deal at $6.5 million. And I want to start with that, Russ, because
I'm going to kill a fly first. Hold on.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
Yeah.
You got it. Good job. Yeah, some animal rights, or you are.
At the end of the day, it's a fly, Mike.
Okay, so this is my issue. Is Brendan Gallagher a good player? Yes.
Yes.
Is Brendan Gallagher going to be a good player in 6 years? No. And then I say that because he's a smaller player.
Okay, that's fair.
He has good speed now, But if you're talking about wear and tear on a player, he takes a lot of punishment. And that's the one concern that I have, is that maybe by year 3 of this deal or year 4 of this deal, that contract is going to be a liability. Right now, I think it's a good deal, and they've shut him up. They've paid him money, and he'll be the professional pest.
Well, I don't think they've shut him up. Like, they want him there. He's a.
I think he was complaining about the fact that he didn't get paid, and now he got paid, so he'll shut up.
Oh no, Mike. It goes beyond that with you and Gallagher. But anyhow,
he's a rat. But okay,
right. Thank you for at least let it just bubble out of the surface, man. Just get it
all
out.
out, Mike.
Hate flow through you.
Get it all out, Mike.
He's a good player, but he's a rat.
Anyhow, he is an integral guy in that locker room. He is a fan favorite. And he is effective. At the end of the day, for all these years that Montreal has been struggling, he, even in his not greatest years, always seems to come through and help them at key times. So I think he's getting rewarded for that.
Right.
I still think he is an effective player, and I think he'll be for most of that deal. But I see your point at the end of that deal. This team should still get better, though, with the young guys getting better, with Kotkaniemi getting better, with Suzuki getting better, with all that happening. Their defense is maybe the best it's been in a very long time. And it's not like it's the best mobile offensive defense, but they have guys who could play solid defense. They have some that have big shots. So it's a pretty good mix. Like right now, I would rate their defense ahead of the Flyers, just as an example.
Yeah, I mean,
because, 1 through 6.
Yeah,
I actually think they're pretty good.
I mean, Jan, I like their top 4 on the blue line because it's probably going to be, Petrie, Weber, Alexander Romanov, and Edmondson. That's pretty solid. I mean, we don't know what Romanoff is, but from everything we've seen at the World Junior and everything that we've heard, maybe they take a little pressure off of him and put him in the bottom pairing to start the season. But I have a feeling by the end of the year, he would be in their top 4. Obviously, they've added size and some scoring up front with
Mike. We're losing Mike. Jan, what do you think?
So it's interesting. So in terms of Gallagher, I know a lot of people have given the comparison to Ryan Callahan, right? I don't. So what I would say the difference between the two is Callahan was one who initiated contact more so than Gallagher does, right? Gallagher will clearly try to dish out hits, but I don't think he's the similar type player of Callahan. But I do think that the concern that he will wear down is somewhat valid given what we saw at Callahan. Do I think it's going to be as precipitous as we saw at Callahan? Probably no, but I do think some of the issues there could be something that happens down the road, right? So the interesting part is, what do they do with Philip Deneau now? What do they do with Tomas Tatar now after his contract expires?
I think Tatar is gone. I think
well, again, you figure that Cole Caulfield eventually is going to replace him in that position based upon them getting him right. They also got Jan Misak, who is also a nice signing as well. I mean, they
could be there sooner than some people think because of the way he's playing in the men's league and all that.
I think the guys you're going to see who's going to be gone. I think Tatar may be gone. I think they would love right now to find a taker for Jonathan Drouin, though I don't think they're going to be able to find it. If you're going to find somebody who they expose to Seattle, in my opinion, Drouin's one of the guys who they will expose based upon the constitution of the team. I do still think the bottom pairing may need some assistance, right? You still have, if you're going to go with Edmondson and Petrie, and even if you say Romanoff moves out and Weber, your bottom pairing is still not particularly great. I mean, Brent Kulak's fine. Jen Sherrod is fine. I think you need some upgrades, but there are much more. They're a deeper lineup. There's no question about that. I mean, we also think that Suzuki's going to have a major step forward. We think Kotkaniemi's going to have a major step forward. The interesting part is, look, Anderson bet on himself. He came in and said, look, either you give me a 1-year deal or I want a long-term deal, no in between. And Montreal decided, you know what? We traded Domi for him. We think if he can stay healthy, he has a shot to be what he was 2 years ago. I think they may be overvaluing him a little bit. $5.5 million in a flat cap is a little pricey, but the viewpoint is that they'll make up the bulk of that contracts in year probably 2, 3, and 4. And then even if there's a degradation, still net will be a positive. But I do think that Montreal is a better team. And then, look, adding Jake Allen, even though they paid him an extension of $2.875 million a year, they now can rest Price as frequently as necessary, especially if Allen plays like he did at spurts last year. when Binnington had his struggles, Allenton actually played fairly well last year for St. Louis.
Yeah, and I think Paling will get a shot at making the team. I do think he's coming along fine. I think, Eric the other day gave a decent answer, but he sort of gave the patented Canadians type answer, like, "Hey, he's working his way into the lineup."
Yeah, this is the issue that I have, and again, maybe my anti-Montreal bias is showing here, but okay,
no,
are they good? Are they better? Yes, but did they really address the problems that they had that I think were painfully apparent going into this season? I don't think so. It's like,
I mean, if Anderson scores 20 goals,
they're defensively. They're deeper offensively. They're much more physical than they used to be with the addition of Anderson.
Well, that's why
last year struggled at times last year.
And that's why
they're better also.
Jan, that's why I said I think their biggest need, and of course Bergevin recognized that their biggest need was last year was at center, and that's why they signed Aho to the offer sheet. If they think Suzuki is truly a top 2 center and Kotkaniemi is a top 2 center, then they're fine. I need to see more proof. They played great in the playoffs.
Well, that'll be their 2 and 3 because everybody look. Philip Deneau's not an awesome, not an elite scorer, but he is damn good as a Selke candidate and can contribute 50 points in a season, which is fine for what he brings them. He's more
from what I've heard, he's more slotting in as a number 3, as a checker.
But he's going to open the year as the 1. Unless if Suzuki and Kotkaniemi take the steps forward, then they'll swap. But for now, I think he's going to center that top line.
Here's what I would say. Mike won't like this, but if everything broke right, they would be knocking on the Leafs' door and giving them a hard time in that division. They would.
I actually think that they would be knocking on the Bruins' door.
Well, it could be either one of them, but it could be. But it could be the Leafs. If the Bruins are the Bruins again and everything's great, then it'll be between those two. But if not, it could be the Bruins.
And that's where I wanted to go to next because the goaltending stayed the same with the Bruins. They re-signed Kevin Miller, who's still listed on Cap Friendly as being on injured reserve. Their defense is the same.
He's just comfortable there.
Although Zdeno Chara still has not re-signed, so with every day that he hasn't re-signed, you have to worry whether maybe he retires or what. We don't know what's going to happen.
He's not going to the island, that's for sure.
That's true. Jake DeBrusk is still a restricted free agent. In terms of additions, they brought in Craig Smith on a 3-year deal, and that's basically and Greg McKegg, and that's it. And we've heard stuff that they were in on Hall, that they might be in on Hoffman, but they haven't really moved yet. And now the information that comes out, Russ, is that Pasternak and Marchand may not start the season because of off-season surgeries. So that's the reason why I say the Bruins are really just at this point, I think they've taken a major step backward.
But all they care is if they're in the playoff hunt. They don't care about winning the division. They just need to be in the playoff hunt. They did still prove, even in these last playoffs, that yes, they get in there and they could still be dangerous. Now, again, they didn't have their number 1 goalie, so that was a big deal. But still, Halak's not huge drop-off, but it's a drop-off. End of the day here, though, I think the Chara thing could get interesting because a lot of teams do want him on a 1-year deal. There's a ton of them that do. And he's, with his agent saying he's going to take his time, that's sort of agent speak for we haven't gotten the right number from the Bruins, and they think that we're just going to come in and sign for whatever they want us to because he wants to return there. And I think Chara, knowing this is his last deal, wants a deal that he feels is respectful and not like a minimum deal. And you know what? Well, in a way, I think he's right because if you take Chara off of that defense gets a lot shakier. It does.
Yeah, a lot smaller too. And Jan, this is the thing. If Chara had not won that cup in 2011, I would say he'd be hunting out there for a team that he thought could win a Stanley Cup. Yes. And maybe he still is. Maybe he thinks, okay, I'm in Colorado could use me on a 1-year deal. It'd be like Bork going from Boston to Colorado. But Colorado could use me on a 1-year deal, and I go there and I win the Stanley Cup and I retire. I think that's just as likely as him returning to Boston for another year.
Potentially, but I do think, like we talked about also with Thornton, right? Does the pull of a location where you spent a suspended amount of time, especially when you have the C on your chest, matter more than going somewhere else for a 1-year deal to potentially chase another cup? And also, it may depend on his belief system as to whether or not Boston is really going to contend for another cup again, right? So, as you said, we have Pasternak and Marchand likely probably both missing anywhere from the first couple of weeks to the first month, depending on their recovery from surgery.
Or when the season starts.
Right, if the season starts on time. Then there's a trickle-down impact in terms of the record and everything else. And look, Chara is a safety net. Having him there makes a huge difference, no pun intended, in terms of his size, into that blue line, right? And also, Charlie McAvoy is going to have to play a much bigger part on that blue line now. And he's going to have to take that step forward that everybody thought he could take when he was drafted in that position where he was taken. To me, he's kind of the fulcrum of everything, because if McAvoy played like he did a couple of years ago, that has a major impact in terms of their blue line, and everything else can settle in around him.
I mean, here's what I would say. I looked up Chara's salary. It was $375 last year, right? I think I
think it was 2. I think he took an even lower deal. But go on. I'll check.
I don't know. It said $375 in 19-20 according to Cap Friendly, but maybe go ahead. Either way, if he made $375, you got to give him $3, whether you want to or not. Because with all these injuries and everything else, if you somehow start the season and Chara decides, I'll wait out the offer, I'm not in any rush, they're going to be hurting. They really will. I mean, again, if I'm going to count who would I rather have at this age, and he's older, Chara or Joe Thornton, I'm going to take Chara every day of the week, because Chara has been training his ass off all these years. Thornton is now starting to round himself into better shape the last couple of years because he realizes the end is near. And that's not anything negative on Thornton. It's just the total positive of Chara, where he has just maintained himself better. That's all.
Russ, we were both right.
Okay.
Chara's cap hit was 2. He had $1,750,000 in performance bonuses.
Okay.
He qualified for some of them. So,
right.
So they're taking that 1 point. Part of that
this year, you know what? Then give him $2 million straight and another $1 million in bonuses, and get him in there. Because if you don't get him in there, there is going to be an uneasiness in that locker room. Bergeron and Marchand. Bergeron can't do it himself.
Yeah, and we're also talking about basically Matt Grzelcyk moving into Torrey Krug's role, probably as the power play quarterback. I don't think they're going to want to lump McAvoy to do power play on top of what he's doing 5-on-5. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dilemmas.
There's a lot of things there. Like, they're not as set as they were this year with the time off going back into the playoffs. There's a lot more askew now, and that's why I think they really do have to get this Chara thing settled.
Now, maybe they go out and sign Sammy Vatanen. You know, there are some defensemen still out there, but I'm not sure. I mean, right now there's a big hole in that blue line. You know, your top 2 defensemen next to McAvoy are right now. You know, one is definitely gone, and the other one is there's not an idea of whether he's coming back.
I mean, if Chara's not there, I'm assuming like Jeremy Lawson gets in, and he could be physical, but he's not close to Chara, but he's not quite, what he will be in the NHL either, but he does have a physical nature to him.
Right, and don't forget, they still have to re-sign DeBrusk and Grzelcyk, who are both restricted free agents, which impacts the amount of cap space that's available.
Or trade DeBrusk. They still might trade DeBrusk.
Yeah, but that's going to hurt their depth in terms of their lines, in my opinion.
I know, but they don't want to pay him long term. So either he gets traded now, or he probably gets traded at the deadline.
Yeah.
But all right. The problem with trading him at the deadline is you got to now pay him, right? And they may. Right. That could be another RFA trade, or
So if you trade him, who's your second line left wing?
Well, I mean,
Anders Bjork, I don't think can fill that role right now.
Well, they might juggle things around, and what if DeBrusk is in a line A trade? Like, again, Winnipeg has gone back around.
Or Russ, they go out and sign somebody who's still in free agency on a 1-year deal, because they can do that, and there's a lot of players. I don't think Hoffman's going to take a 1-year deal, but
I don't know.
I don't know.
In Boston, he might, because he could put up big numbers with Krejci as his center. And
yeah.
All right, moving
a bad move.
Yeah, moving on to the Leafs.
Here we go.
Russ and I was just going to sit back and let you go on a monologue. So go ahead.
Yeah, Tyson Barrie and Cody Ceci, who, by the way, has not signed yet, are gone. They've added Zach Bogosian and TJ Brody.
You don't think he's going to sign?
Let me get through this, and then you can rip me to pieces. Come on. Jesus.
No fun that way.
I know. Well, no, sorry, this isn't fun. This is just we're doing a job here.
I'm sorry.
They've added Wayne Simmons, they've added Jimmy VC, and they've added Travis Boyd, who's a Marley signing, up front. Why is there somebody missing here? Oh, sorry, Aaron Dell, but that's another Marley signing.
Yeah, but be a third goalie if they need one. So
yes, which is, I mean,
or fourth or fifth. Yeah.
They needed one last year. Okay, and they traded Andreas Janssen for Joey Anderson. Right. Okay, I think the Leafs are better. I think they're especially much better on the bottom six, which was necessary because their bottom six really didn't do a lot in the playoff loss to Columbus. I think they're significantly better on the blue line with Brody and Bogosian replacing Ceci and TJ and Tyson Barrie. But do I think that they're now like in the upper echelon and a contender? No. I think they would have been that, and I wrote about this earlier this week, Russ. I said that my calculation was that adding Pietrangelo, which according to Carlo Koliakovo, who's his buddy from St. Louis and now on TSN radio in Toronto, that if the cap had gone up with instead of because COVID happened, if it had gone up, or if the Leafs were willing to trade Nylander, meaning Dubas willing to trade Nylander, that Pietrangelo would have come to Toronto now, or likely would have come. They would have been in the mix. Instead, the calculation was we were keeping Nylander and we're signing Brody. I don't know whether, and we won't know for a couple years, whether they will be better with Nylander and Brody as opposed to Pietrangelo. My suspicion is they won't be, but I can't say that for sure. But do you think the Leafs are better?
I think they're better. They at least have more depth on defense. Did you count Sandin as a starter, or you think maybe that's not going to happen now? At
this point, right now, no, because I think right now they have.
But he could win the job.
He could win the job on the bottom pairing. Yes.
Right. Okay. No, they have more depth. If Bogosian were to play a certain amount of games, that could help them. Brody at least helps them tighten up. I don't want to say defense because he doesn't play defense, but he's not as loose, at least as. Tyson Barrie was. I think their defense is marginally better. They're a lot greasier, though, and I could see them now on their other lines not getting blown off the puck and at least maybe getting some goals in dirty areas that they aren't used to doing, except for Zach Hyman. So I think that's a plus. I still don't love their goaltending, but Anderson's proven in the regular season, at least. I'm going to highlight the regular season because that's all we're talking about. So they should be a playoff team, but I don't know if they improve their chances. Like if everything goes right with Boston and they have no injury problems by the time the playoffs roll around and everybody's there, are they good enough to beat Boston? And I say they might take them to 7 now, but I still don't think they're good enough to beat them if all is equal, like with health.
Jan?
So they definitely are greasier. One of the things we talked about last year is we were a little bit too perimeter, that they weren't able to get down low, right? So Simmons helps you that. Granted, he doesn't have the foot speed anymore that he might have in the past, but he has a big body. He is a guy that is in front. Getting Bogosian also makes him a bit tougher on the blue line. Adding Brody does the same for them. Granted, it's an upgrade in terms of what we saw last year. Right. Where Jimmy VC slots in, I know some people think second line. To me, he's more of a third line. I mean, with Kerfoot and Mikheyev, you have a good 2/3 of a good third line there, and depends on who else. Adding Spezza, we talked about before, and we liked it based upon what he provided them last year. The question really is going to come down to is do they need an upgrade still in defense? Another upgrade compared to what they got. Does Joey Anderson make the roster and provide them another physical presence maybe down the stretch? What do they do with Liljegren? Does he slot in, or Sandin end up making the roster? And then it's going to come playoff time. I mean, can Freddie Anderson be the guy in the playoffs? The jury, as we've seen for several years, is still out. If they don't get past that this year, and he is the reason, clearly then they're going to have to go ahead and make another move next year and try to find somebody who they feel can be the guy to get them over the hump. Now, good. It all depends also, with the expansion draft, who they're going to protect and who they're going to lose, and who they're going to try to move to be able to avoid losing somebody that they may end up losing based upon no movement clauses and guys they want to keep.
Just to answer the chat room, I've looked. I don't believe there's an official retirement at a Dion Phaneuf, and why not? He's still making that Leafs money. I would keep making it if he can.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we both saw it.
I think he's got. Well, he doesn't have to officially. He's not going to officially retire because I think there's still 1 year on his deal. Let me just with Ottawa. No, actually, there's 3 years left.
Oh my goodness!
But he's been bought out, so it's
no. I know, but this is like that Leafs deal that I witnessed that day. That was his retirement fund.
Yeah, exactly. And Alicia needs all the money she can get. Now, sorry about that, Alicia. No, this is interesting, Alex. This is from a typical Toronto perspective, because why in the hell would Columbus want Frederik Andersen when they've got Elvis making $4 million?
Right.
I mean, you could say, well, they want to trade Dubinsky and his $5.85 salary, but it's covered under insurance, so they're probably not getting 80% of that money back. And Korpisalo makes 2.8. They don't want $9 million in goaltending. That's the last thing they want. So, that's not happening. Okay,
that's not the model you want. There are a few teams that have that, but that's not the model you want.
Now, the only thing that you could say is Anderson's $1 million in money and $5 million in cap. So it's not a $5 million payout for Columbus, but Columbus wants to add players. And they want to re-sign Dubois and re-sign. I think there's somebody else who's a restricted free agent, Gavrikov. So, they need the cap space. So, yes. Okay. Anyway, let's see here. Finally, Tampa.
What Funky was saying about Liljegren being trade bait.
Yeah,
he may end up getting that. That may happen, similar to Bracco, and he may not be there anymore. But end of the day, Liljegren can play hockey, and somebody is going to utilize them. The Leafs are doing what a lot of teams do, and they are discounting as many players as they can from the previous regime.
Yeah,
and they've never given him a chance, not even a minute.
They gave him a chance last year.
Yeah, how many games?
It was I think it was less than 10, but I'm just saying
that's like the old Rangers used to do that. Come up and show us what you could do in 10 games, and if you don't do it, you probably never get another chance again. But to me, that's not a chance.
Okay, he's been 3 years in the AHL, but he's got 2 more years until they have to put him through waivers.
Right.
So he's probably going to end up with the Marlies. We'll see. Finally, Tampa Bay. Obviously, now Tampa Bay.
But I will answer this, and you can too, Mike. Will 85 asked, would Nate Schmidt not make Toronto better? He would, but they don't want that salary.
Yeah. I don't know.
If he didn't have those years attached to him and everything else, sure.
I don't understand the question.
If you could get Nate Schmidt without that contract, he would help that team, but
right. I think he's in a way he's saying if Vegas had signed Pietrangelo and the Leafs hadn't signed Brody, would Nate Schmidt as a replacement been better? And I'm like, he's not that.
That's kind of a wash.
He's not the threat. He's not really the type of defenseman.
Brody actually still has more offensive upside, to be fair.
Now, okay, Tampa Bay, just to finish off here, they've lost, obviously. They re-signed Patrick Maroon, they re-signed Luke Shen, they lost Bogosian. But really, right now it's status quo, and that's the interest. They lost Carter Verhaeghe.
Shattenkirk also.
And Shattenkirk. They lost Carter Verhaeghe as well. But right now, they haven't made a move, and Jan, it's getting tougher for them because they have to make moves. And I don't know how realistic these Stamkos things are, because he's got a no move clause. Why in the hell would he waive his no move clause?
He's not doing it.
He's not. I think they'd like to potentially. Remember, they have about $3 million in cap space right now, and they need to re-sign Cirelli and Sergachev and Cernak. So if you can figure out how they're doing that with about $3 million in cap space, you're smarter than me, because right now I don't see how that works out. So look, that includes also Tyler Johnson signing, which they're on the hook for as of now because they've waived him. And even if you can send him down to the minors, you're still only clearing $1 million in cap space on your roster, which isn't going to be sufficient enough to sign. Cernak, you could probably get him in. I'm not sure how you're getting Sergachev and Cirelli, and especially they go into arbitration, right? So that's going to be probably part of the issue. So they're going to have no choice but to figure out how to jettison some salary, and I'm not quite sure what they're going to do. They tried it with Johnson. look, your scenario you laid out was probably what they were hoping, right? That he gets claimed by Detroit. Detroit then flips him back to them, and they eat some salary, and they save some capital that way. But other than that, I mean, the only other alternative is maybe, for all we know, Stamkos ends up on long-term IR, and they free up his salary that way, and that's how they try to get these three guys signed, because other than that, they have a very tough road ahead of them to figure out who they get rid of and how they can free up enough.
Yeah, it's hard to say other than we think they're going to be good. We have no idea what that team's going to look like.
And if the contract of Johnson was front-loaded, it might be easier for them to have made that move somewhere.
Yeah, but nobody wanted him. I'm sure they tried.
Right. But for teams wanting to get to the cap floor, if it was a front-loaded deal, it might have been easier. But the last 4 years of his deal, they're 3.75, 5.5, 3.75, and 4.75. So they're not going to be. He's a 30-year-old smaller guy who's starting to lose his speed. He's still a decent player, but he's not a $5 million player.
No.
And he's got a modified no trade clause, a full no trade this year and a modified no trade the next 3 years. I mean, if they send him to Syracuse, maybe he agrees to waive the no trade clause, but then you're ruining the asset because he's in the NHL. So I
give props to his agent.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing, but I mean, they're going to have to move somebody. I mean, and the thing is, they're ripe for an offer sheet because all three of these free agents that we talked about, Cirelli, Sergachev, and Cernak, are all restricted with no arbitration, so they can be offer sheeted.
Yep.
And this is going to be tough for Steve Yzerman, for Julian Breezeball to work this, and maybe he'll have to contact Steve Yzerman to see if he can get him to help him out a little bit, but we'll see. Okay, good show, guys. We will be back tomorrow, likely at 3 p.m. with Kevin Allen, for Jan Levine, for Russ Cohen. I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz,